The Great Pyramid of Giza is made from more than 2 million blocks of stone. Most of them weigh around 2.5 tons. That's already heavier than a car, but a handful of them, sitting near the very top of the structure, weigh closer to 80 tons each. That's the weight of a loaded school bus, lifted 175 feet into the air, with no modern crane, no engine, and no wheel large enough to move it. And somehow, 4,500 years ago, every single block ended up exactly where it needed to be. The whole structure aligned to true north within a fraction of a degree. The people who built it left behind a story about who showed up to help. We'll get to that. If you appreciate this type of content, gently tap that like button. Let's get into it. Start with the weight problem, because it's the part most people never hear. The granite used for those massive interior beams didn't come from anywhere near Giza. It was quarried in Aswan, more than 500 miles south, floated down the Nile, and then somehow raised into position above the king's chamber. The cuts on some of these blocks are precise enough that a few researchers have compared the tolerances to something closer to a modern diamond saw than a handheld copper chisel. Make of that what you will. Egyptologists agree the granite got there. What they still argue about is how it was lifted that high with no surviving blueprint, and no tool ever found that explains it. And the chamber it was lifted into has its own separate mystery. Some researchers have gone even further, arguing that the room wasn't designed to hold a body at all. Engineer Christopher Dunn proposed it was tuned, acoustically, even electromagnetically, to function as something closer to a resonance chamber than a tomb. Mainstream Egyptology rejects that reading entirely, but nobody's fully explained why granite, specifically, was selected and shaped with that level of precision in the first place, when limestone would have been far easier to work with. Now compare that to a site most people have never heard of, Baalbek, in modern-day Lebanon. In the local quarry, still sitting exactly where it was cut, there's a block known as the Stone of the South, estimated to weigh over 1,650 tons. Local legend here doesn't bother with subtlety. As far back as records go, residents have told the same story, that the stones were cut and set by giants, working under orders from Nimrod before the flood. Most historians treat that as folklore, but somebody, using some method, moved stone heavier than a fully loaded jumbo jet, with no machine known to exist at the time. To put the scale in perspective, the largest modern construction cranes today max out around 20,000 tons of lifting capacity, and they need a paved site, hydraulics, and steel cable to do it. The people who quarried this stone had none of that. They got it most of the way to its destination, and then, for reasons nobody has ever explained, they just stopped. So, what did the people who built these things actually say about how they did it? This is where it gets strange. Ancient Egyptian texts describe a group called the Followers of Horus, rulers said to have governed before the first recorded pharaohs associated with the sky. There's also a carving at the Temple of Abydos that internet circles nicknamed the helicopter hieroglyph, a section of wall where an older inscription was plastered over and recarved, and the overlapping symbols happen to form a shape that, from the right angle, looks uncomfortably like a modern aircraft. Egyptologists call it a textbook palimpsest, older text reused under newer text. It's a fully accepted, fully boring explanation. Take a look for yourself and decide if it explains everything you're seeing. Independently, ancient Sumerian tablets from Mesopotamia describe beings called the Anunnaki, often translated roughly as those who from the sky came. There's a Sumerian cylinder seal, sometimes called the Adder seal, that shows a circular pattern some ancient astronaut researchers read as a depiction of our solar system. Others go further and call it a rocket. Most Assyriologists who actually study cuneiform reject both readings. They identify it as a sun god surrounded by symbolic deities. But the seal has stayed a fixture of this theory for decades, because once you've heard the alternate reading, it's hard to look at the image the same way again. Researcher Zechariah Sitchin built an entire body of work around this language, arguing it describes literal visitors who passed down advanced knowledge to early humans. Most mainstream historians strongly reject that interpretation. But the sky language itself, repeated across cultures with no contact with each other, isn't in dispute. It's just unexplained. Now that we have leaned into the alien angle, let's give the other side a fair hearing. Mainstream archaeology has a real, evidence-based explanation, and it's not thousands of slaves with whips, like the old movies show. Excavations led by archaeologist Mark Lenner uncovered an entire workers' village near Giza. Bakeries, bread, beer, medical care, and bunk-style housing for a paid, organized labor force, likely in the tens of thousands during peak construction. They had copper chisels, wooden sledges, and used wet sand to reduce friction when dragging stones. That part of the puzzle is genuinely solved. What's not fully solved is the lifting. Multiple ramp theories exist: straight ramps, spiral ramps, internal ramps, and each one solves part of the problem while creating a new one. A straight ramp long enough to lift an 80-ton stone 175 feet would need to be longer than the pyramid itself, and no trace of one has ever been found. None of the leading theories get us all the way there. That gap between what we can prove and what we can explain is exactly where this theory lives. Whoever, or whatever, left that mark on the stone, some people think they never really left. And if you want to go deeper on the other side of this mystery, let me know in the comments section. Thank you for watching Alien Thoughts with Mike. See you next time.